Have you ever loved someone so profoundly that you were willing to lose yourself for them? He's Lachlan Vance, a cold-hearted billionaire in Silicon Valley, a man who once believed success could take the place of love. And she's Hollis Marin, the woman who walked away to hold on to her own faith in herself. 8 months later, he finds her holding a baby, with eyes uncannily like his own. From that moment, everything changes. A journey begins not to reclaim the past, but to learn how to love again. If stories that touch the heart speak to you, comment and tell me which city you're listening from. And don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the little bell so you won't miss a moment of this emotional love story. Let's begin. On a rainy night, 40 floors above the city. That night, the rain came earlier than usual. Thin drops, like strands of glass, wove a curtain across the wide window pane, falling silently over the glittering streets of Silicon Valley. From the 40th floor of VanceTech Tower, everything below was reduced to pinpoints of light, distant, breathlike, almost unreal. Lachlan Vance stood before the glass, his hand still wrapped around a cup of cold espresso, eyes fixed on the slow flow of headlights in the rain. He'd just finished an 18-hour meeting. Everyone else had gone home. The office lights had one by one gone dark, leaving only the pale glow of screens flashing global market data. At 39, he had everything: a $12 billion tech company, a penthouse that touched the sky, and a reputation that inspired awe and fear. Everything, except sleep. Lachlan hadn't slept a whole night since Hollis left. The room around him was as cold as he was. A marble desk, the gleam of a Patek Philippe reflecting the light, and endless numbers pulsing across the monitors like the heartbeat of the tech empire he commanded. Everything was precise, orderly, under control except the one thing that mattered most: his heart. He adjusted his tie, a reflex meant to tighten the chaos inside. But then, the phone on his desk lit up. A message from his lawyer. "We need to discuss the Hollis situation. She still hasn't signed." Just one line, yet his chest turned to stone. Hollis Marin. Her name still burned like an unhealed wound. It had been 8 months since he walked out of their home in Palo Alto. 8 months since he decided love was an unpredictable variable in the equation of success. He told himself he'd done the right thing. Hollis deserved someone with time for her, not a CEO buried under deadlines and investors. That ending things was how he protected them both from disappointment. But the worst thing about self-justification is when you start to believe it. He sat down and opened his laptop, partly because work wasn't finished, mostly because he didn't want to face the emptiness before him. He meant to open a report, but his hand froze on the search bar. He typed, "Hollis Marin." He hadn't done this once in 8 months. When they divorced, he'd blocked her everywhere, deleted emails, erased her number. That was his way, cut clean, no room for weakness. But tonight, as the rain tapped relentlessly against the glass, the loneliness became too heavy for logic to hold. Just once, he told himself, to look. Her Instagram appeared, and his heart stumbled at the very first image. Her profile picture, Hollis, smiling in the sunlight, hair lifted by the wind. Gone was the woman strained by arguments. Gone was the sadness he'd left behind. She looked radiant. Free. She was doing fine without him. He scrolled. Portland, a small cafe with maple trees burning red and stacks of books by a window. She'd gone back home. He smiled faintly. At least she'd found peace. But then one photo made his entire world stop. A hospital room. Soft white light on her tired but glowing face. Hollis is in a hospital gown, hair tied back, cradling a tiny pink bundle wrapped in blue. The caption read, "Everything I never knew I needed. Welcome to the world, little one." 15 days old. 15 days. He whispered, his lips dry. Lachlan Vance, a man who could close billion-dollar deals with a nod, felt everything inside him collapse. He began counting backward in his mind. The date she posted, the day he left, the day he said, "We should get divorced." The timeline matched perfectly. His hand trembled. The baby's mouth curved like his. Its tiny fist was clenched, just like his, when he slept as a child. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was his child. The phone slipped from his grasp and hit the marble floor with a hollow sound. The screen still glowed with that image, Hollis's eyes. A light with pure joy. Joy that no longer included him. Outside, the rain fell harder. Each drop sounded like the weight of guilt the universe had reserved just for him. And for the first time in 8 months, Lachlan had no idea what to do. No place to run. Only one truth pounding in his chest. I have a child, and I wasn't there when they were born. Morning came, and the city was still drenched. Faint sunlight broke through the clouds, a cruel reminder that the day continued even when his world had shattered. Lachlan didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just walked through the echoing emptiness of his penthouse, footsteps hollow against the marble floor. Everything that once symbolized power, the glass walls, the magazine covers bearing his face, now stood as monuments of his loneliness. He called Marcus Chen, his head of security, the man who'd helped him handle hackers, corporate spies, every kind of threat, but never something like this. Marcus's gravelly voice came through the phone. Business or personal, sir? Personal. Just one word, but it startled even him to hear it aloud. I need you to find someone. Hollis Marin. She's in Portland, Oregon. I need her address. As soon as possible. A pause. Your ex-wife, sir? Something like that. Understood. I'll get back to you within 6 hours. The line went dead. Lachlan sank into his chair, head in his hands. He was a man who could move markets with a decision, yet utterly powerless in his own life. He opened a drawer and took out a small velvet box. The engagement ring Hollis had thrown to the floor the morning he said he wanted a divorce was inside. He'd never been able to throw it away. What he called a memento was really evidence of his guilt. The diamond still shone, but its light no longer sparkled, it only ached. The phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Address found, 2847 Burnside Street, apartment 3B, Portland. Also, birth certificate lists father as blank. He froze. Blank. She'd erased him legally and emotionally. Lachlan didn't think twice. An hour later, he was at his private hangar. The jet cut through the grey sky, piercing layers of heavy cloud. He looked out the window, the rain still followed, as if unwilling to let him go. The flight lasted only 2.5 hours, but it felt like a lifetime for Lachlan. Each minute carried the face of a child he'd never met, the sound of Hollis's laughter, the price of everything he'd sacrificed for a hollow dream called success. When he landed, Portland greeted him with the scent of wet earth and the chill of rainforest air. Tree-lined streets, small houses with wooden porches, golden string lights in the windows, the smell of coffee drifting from corner cafes, a world utterly different from Silicon Valley. Warm, real, alive. The car stopped before a 3-story brick building on Burnside Street. Moss grew on the steps, flowers hung by the window, and the faded number 3B shimmered with rain. Lachlan sat in the car for a long time. His hand rested on the door handle, but his heart wasn't ready. Then, the front door opened. A woman stepped out, pushing a stroller. Hollis. Her hair was longer now, tied back neatly. The fatigue of the past had been replaced by calm light. She wore a soft green sweater and jeans, simple, yet glowing with quiet grace. And in the stroller, a sleeping baby, face hidden beneath a blue blanket. The world fell silent, everything narrowed to the three: him, her, and that tiny life. She bent down to adjust the blanket. A gentle smile touched her lips, tender, full of love. Something tightened in Lachlan's chest. For 8 months, he'd lived like a ghost. But in that single moment, he felt alive again. She turned and their eyes met. Time stopped. No Silicon Valley, no past, no guilt. Only the Portland rain falling between two people who had once lost each other. And in that stillness, Lachlan knew. Everything he had built no longer mattered, because he was standing before the only things worth fighting for: his child, and the woman he had once loved more than life itself. The jet sliced through a wall of clouds, leaving a faint white trail behind. Inside the cabin, Lachlan Vance sat in silence, eyes fixed on the grey horizon ahead where ribbons of fog curled and swallowed the first light of morning. He didn't know exactly what he was chasing, only that he wouldn't be able to breathe if he stayed. For the first time in 10 years, he was on a flight with no schedule, meeting, or deal waiting at the destination. Just one name pulling him forward: Hollis Marin. He tightened his seatbelt as the captain's voice came over the intercom: beginning our descent. Light rain in Portland. Temperature 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Lachlan closed his eyes, leaning back. The image replayed repeatedly: Hollis's photo, the baby's tiny hands, the caption, 15 days old. He tried to steady his breathing, but everything churned like a storm inside. Part of him wanted to scream from guilt. The other part was terrified to face her. Hollis might slam the door. She might yell, or worse, say nothing at all. But he had no choice. He needed to see the child, even just once. When the plane landed, Portland greeted him with the damp scent of earth and the faint aroma of coffee in the wind. Scarlet maple leaves shimmered on the wet streets, and soft rain fell like mist. This city was unlike any place he'd ever known. It breathed in slow rhythm, unhurried, calm, carrying the peace he had long lost. The car stopped in front of the red brick building on Burnside Street. He sat for a long moment, watching through fogged glass. The door opened, and Hollis appeared pushing a stroller, her face serene, her gaze tender. A strange feeling stirred in his chest, joy and pain at once. Joy that they were safe. Pain because he hadn't been there for a single moment of it. He stepped out into the drizzle. Each step on the slick pavement felt unbearably heavy. When only a few feet separated them, Hollis looked up. Her eyes met his a flash of surprise, then calm, a calm so steady it scared him. "Hello, Hollis." His voice was low, rough, unsteady. She paused for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Lachlan." A long silence, only the rain tapping softly on the stroller's hood and the faint squeak of its wheels on the old bricks. He looked down. A tiny boy, rosy-cheeked, lips curved gently in sleep. He stopped breathing. Every familiar feature cut through him like glass. "What's his name?" he asked softly. "Oliver James Marin," she said without meeting his eyes. A beautiful name. Something in the way she said it made his throat close. He wanted to say it was perfect, but the words stuck in his chest. He pressed his lips together. "Can he hold him?" She looked at him quiet for a long time, then nodded slightly. Just for a moment. He startles easily. He bent down, his hands trembling. Each movement is clumsy, uncertain. Hollis lifted the baby and gently placed him in his arms, as if handing over the entire world to a man who once believed he didn't need one. The feeling broke him open. A small, warm, living weight rested against his chest, fragile, real, his. A piece of himself that made everything else meaningless. "Hey there," he whispered, voice cracking. "It's Dad." Hollis stood still. Her eyes shimmered, but she said nothing. Watching the man who had once been too proud for emotion tremble as he held their son, she didn't know whether to feel anger, pity, or love. "I know I was wrong," Lachlan said quietly, "but please, don't make me learn to be a father from pictures." She lowered her gaze and voice even. "You can't just fly here, say a few words, and think everything changes. I know. I'm not the woman who used to wait for you, and I'm not the man who made you wait." Their eyes met. Hers were deep, tired but not entirely closed. "A child doesn't need two people who hate each other," she said. "I'm not here to fight," he replied, still looking at Oliver. "I just want to be near him. Even if I'm nothing more than your friend, I still want to be his father." Hollis was silent. The rain filled the space between them, steady, endless, like an unwritten answer. Then she said softly, "Come by. Once a week. We'll see." Lachlan looked up. See if you're really staying or if this is just another flight in your life." That afternoon, as Lachlan left Burnside Street, the city was wrapped in fog. He stood under an awning, watching bicycles glide past, the air rich with coffee and wood smoke. Hollis carried Oliver inside and closed the door gently, but firmly enough to make his chest ache, as if he'd been locked out of a world that should have been his all along. He looked around. The city wasn't loud. It didn't glitter, but it was warm. This may be where he was supposed to begin again. On his way back to the Nines Hotel, he opened his phone and stared at the photo he'd snapped of Oliver asleep. He smiled, a small, quiet smile no one at VanceTech had ever seen. Soft, real. Lachlan Vance wasn't afraid of losing anything for the first time in his life because he had finally found something worth keeping. That night, his hotel room glowed in soft amber light. Outside, Portland's rain clung to the windows like 1,000 suspended exclamation points. Lachlan sat on the bed, two photos before him, one of Hollis with their son, another of the two of them in San Jose, at the VanceTech opening 5 years ago. Two smiles, two moments, two worlds. He didn't know why it hurt so much, only that he finally understood how far he'd drifted. The phone rang his mother, Eleanor Vance. "Still in California?" Her voice calm, precise, controlled. "No, I'm in Portland." A pause. "Hollis?" "Yes." She exhaled softly. "About time you looked at yourself." "I have a son, Mom," he said, trembling. "Good. At least life still has something left to teach you." I missed everything, he whispered. I wasn't even there when he was born. Her voice softened. Your father wasn't there when you were born, either. He froze. I don't want to be like him. No one does. But if you don't stop now, you'll end up exactly where he did. The call ended, but her words echoed through the rain. He walked to the window. Outside, Portland breathed steadily. Through the mist, he could see the faint light from Hollis's apartment. He knew she was awake, maybe reading to Oliver, maybe humming a lullaby. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll come back. Not as a CEO, but as a father." Hollis sat in a small cafe near her apartment the next morning when Lachlan walked in. It was still raining. He wore the same grey coat, his hair damp, his face tired, but his eyes were brighter somehow. She blinked. "No flight this morning?" "No, just coffee." She gave a half smile, part teasing, part curious. "How long are you planning to stay this time? Until you believe I'm not leaving again?" His tone was quiet, but firm. Hollis glanced out the window. The Portland rain fell as it always did, steady. Patient, but time seemed to slow for a moment. The man who once broke her heart stood there. No longer Lachlan Vance, the untouchable billionaire, but someone learning to love again. "You could start," he said with a faint smile, "by teaching me how to make a bottle." She looked at his hand, the one that had hurt her, but also the only place she'd ever felt safe. And for the first time in a long while she nodded. "All right, but don't think it'll be easy, Lachlan." "I don't need easy, Hollis," he said softly. "Just real." By evening, the Portland sky had faded to pale amber. Lachlan pushed the stroller while Hollis walked beside him. Oliver slept soundly, lips curved in a quiet smile, as if he understood something good was slowly returning. Through the fog and gentle rain, they walked silently, the soft roll of stroller wheels the only sound. They didn't speak of the past. They made no promises for the future. Just two people who had once lost each other now watching their child, where everything began again. And somewhere, between the mist and the rain, something small and fragile but real began to grow. Morning in Portland always arrived with the scent of coffee and steam. The night's rain still streaked the window panes, reflecting dawn's soft grey light. On the third floor of a small apartment on Burnside Street, Hollis sat at the kitchen table, pouring coffee. Oliver lay in his crib, squirmed, sneezed softly, then broke into a tiny laugh, a sound so pure it seemed to warm the whole room. Then came a knock on the door. She looked up, already knowing who it was. Two short knocks, one long, the exact rhythm Lachlan used to tap on her office door years ago. When she opened it, he was standing there, grey coat damp with rain, a small bouquet of white tulips in hand. His gaze brushed over her, then settled on the crib. "I know tulips are out of season," he said quietly, "but they're supposed to mean remorse." Hollis eyed the flowers, lips curving slightly. "So you're here to apologize again?" "No," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here to learn how to be a father." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? Oliver's been up since 5. He cries when hungry and wet. Sometimes for reasons I can't explain." He smiled faintly. "I've managed 2,000 employees. I think I can handle one baby." She laughed. "All right then, Mr. CEO, come in." Lachlan stepped inside. The apartment was small, warm, and smelled of toasted bread and milk. On the walls were a few framed photos, Hollis smiling with the baby, Portland in autumn hues, but none of him. It was as if her life had been scrubbed clean of his existence. He leaned over the crib. Oliver blinked up at him, grey eyes mirroring his own, curious, unafraid. Lachlan smiled softly. "Hey there, we've met before." The baby made a gurgling sound and waved his arms wildly. Hollis chuckled. "He's saying, 'You look weird, Dad.'" Lachlan knelt beside the crib. "Can I hold him?" She nodded. "Just remember to support his head. He can't hold it up yet." She reached out, guiding his hands, adjusting his posture. Their skin brushed a fleeting, electric contact that made time stumble. He dared not look up, afraid she'd see how her touch undid him. He lifted Oliver gently, feeling the soft blanket brush his cheek, breathing in the scent of baby powder and milk, the purest scent in the world. Oliver opened his eyes, locking on his. It felt ancient, instinctive, for a heartbeat, as if the child knew. "Hey, little man," Lachlan whispered. "Sorry, I'm late." Hollis watched them, something tender stirring behind her quiet gaze. The morning passed in a series of endearing disasters. Lachlan changed a diaper and soaked his shirt. He mixed the wrong formula ratio. He nearly spilled hot water on the counter. Hollis laughed, shaking her head. "You're not exactly a prodigy at this." He grinned, wiping his hands. "I used to think I could control everything. Turns out the only thing you can't program is a baby." The words hung between them, gentle, true, disarming. It brought her back to the man he'd once been. Logical, unbending, sure about everything but love. After lunch, she lay Oliver down for his nap. The room fell quiet, sunlight filtering through thin curtains, casting soft, moving lines on the floor. Hollis sat across from him. "I used to think I'd never let you see him," she said. He looked up, eyes somber, open. "I understand. But watching you hold him..." She hesitated. "I realized cutting out the past isn't as simple as I wanted it to be." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to erase what I did with words. I want a chance to do right this time." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "We'll see how long that lasts." Her tone was light, but the hardness in her eyes had softened. Something fragile, almost hopeful, flickered there. Later that afternoon, Hollis washed bottles at the sink while Lachlan sat beside Oliver. The baby stirred, reaching out a tiny hand. Lachlan extended his finger, and Oliver gripped it tightly, so small, warm, and impossibly strong. He felt himself dissolve. His father had never held his hand like that, only barked orders from behind a desk. And now this small hand was teaching him something he'd never known, the feeling of connection. Hollis glanced over, smiling softly. "You okay?" He looked up, smiling back. "I've never been better." She chuckled. Imagine that, a CEO saying that. "Yeah," he said quietly, "because for once, I'm holding something I don't ever want to let go of." She said nothing, but her silence was complete with warmth. Outside, rain began again, tapping lightly against the window. The light in the room turned silver and still. Neither of them wanted to break it. Days turned into a new rhythm, quiet, gentle, unspoken. Every Monday and Thursday, Lachlan showed up at Hollis's door. He brought coffee from a corner cafe called Grounded. She liked almond milk lattes, and he always took his black espresso. They didn't talk about the past anymore, only about Oliver, his sleep, his first smiles, the strange little noises he made. She taught him lullabies. He taught her how to tell a hungry cry from a sleepy one. Sometimes they laughed, like when he dropped a bottle and apologized to the baby as if to a major investor. And bit by bit, through Oliver's laughter, the ice between them began to melt. One afternoon, with rain whispering outside, Hollis put Oliver down early for his nap. She sat by the window, ginger tea in hand, while Lachlan watched the baby sleep. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think success meant having the world know your name. But now I think, if he calls me Dad, that's enough." Her eyes softened. "You already had your chance to keep us, Lachlan." "I know," he said, "and I threw it away. So what is it you want now?" "A chance not to make the same mistake again. With him. And if you'd let me, with you, too." She didn't answer, didn't refuse either. Rain deepened, filling the silence. Then Oliver stirred, let out a small laugh in his sleep. They both looked over and laughed too. In that brief, fragile moment, something real bloomed quietly between them, something no apology or promise could ever build. That night, soft yellow light filled the small apartment. At the door, Hollis held the frame with one hand. "Are you flying this Friday?" she asked. He smiled. "No, not unless you're coming with me." She rolled her eyes, smiling despite herself. "That line's old, Lachlan." "I know," he said, "but I'm repeating it not to keep you, but so you know I mean it this time." She looked at him for a long second, then nodded. "Friday, 9 a.m. Oliver's up by then. I'll be here." As he walked away, the door closed softly behind him, but inside his chest, another door had opened for the first time in years. Warm, real, full of hope. Outside, Portland kept raining, but to Lachlan, the rain no longer carried the chill of loneliness. It was simply the sound of something beginning, the quiet rhythm of a man learning, at last, how to love. Grounded Cafe sat on the corner of Pine and 17th, just a few blocks from Hollis's apartment. It was small and old, with wooden floors creaking under every step and the warm scent of roasted coffee mingling with cinnamon, the smell that made you feel like you were being held. Every Monday and Thursday morning, Lachlan Vance came there. No more expensive suits, No assistants following behind. Just a dark brown sweater, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, and the soft jingle of the bell as he pushed through the old wooden door. Hollis always sat near the window at the same corner table, where the light slanted through the white curtains. A baby bottle, a few toys, and her quiet smile are on the table. Each time Lachlan entered, Oliver would squeal that pure, bubbling sound that made the whole cafe turn to look. He'd wave his little hands and kick his feet, his eyes sparkling like tiny grey stars. Lachlan smiled, setting the cups down. "Morning, teammate." "Bah," Oliver babbled. The word not yet perfect, but enough to make Lachlan's heart tremble. Hollis laughed. "He's been practicing. I think that's his first word." Lachlan looked at her with gratitude and awe in his eyes. "Sounds like a miracle to me." She took a sip of her latte and glanced outside at the drizzle. "It's always damp in Portland this time of year, but I like it. It forces people to slow down." "I'm learning that," he said quietly. "Learning not to control everything, not to win every battle, just to be here." She smiled. "And how's the lesson going?" "Not easy," he admitted. "But I have a great teacher." He looked at Oliver, then at her. "Actually, too." Hollis didn't reply, but the corner of her mouth lifted, not quite forgiveness, but no longer guarded. Those mornings became a ritual. They talked about everything: the best coffee beans, old memories, work, the shows Hollis watched while rocking Oliver to sleep. Amid all those ordinary conversations, something subtle began to grow: trust, familiarity, a quiet warmth that didn't need a name. One morning, Hollis brought a photo album. "I printed a few pictures of Oliver. Want to see?" He opened it carefully. Oliver smiling. Oliver in her arms. Oliver minutes after birth, pink and tiny beneath a blue blanket. Lachlan stared for a long time. "I wasn't there," he said softly. "It's all right," she answered. "You're here now." Simple words, light as air, but they landed in his heart like forgiveness. He looked at her eyes, deep, unguarded. "Thank you for letting me come back, Hollis." She said nothing, just turned to the window where the rain fell in quiet sheets. One morning, with Oliver asleep on Lachlan's shoulder, Hollis asked suddenly, "Do you ever think about the years before? What if you'd stopped just for a moment back then?" He was silent. The rain outside mingled with the soft hum of jazz in the cafe. "I've thought about it," he said finally, "and I hate myself for not stopping, but I wouldn't know what love means if I hadn't lost you." She looked at him, her eyes flickering. "You sound like a romantic movie." "Maybe," he smiled. "But for once, it's true." She smiled faintly. "You know, love isn't promising forever. It's choosing to stay every day." He nodded. "I'll remember that." Outside, the rain had stopped. Light spilled across the glass, reflecting their 3 figures: a man, a woman, and the child in his arms. None of them said it aloud, but they all felt it. Something had changed. A rare May morning brought sunshine to Portland, clear and golden, like freshly rinsed linen. Light streamed through Grounded's windows, brushing against Hollis's auburn hair. Oliver sat in Lachlan's lap, playing with a spoon. He reached for the espresso cup, and Lachlan gently pulled it away. "Nope, that's hot, little guy." Oliver blinked, then burst into laughter. Hollis watched, smiling softly. "I've never seen you smile like that before." "Because I never had a reason to," he said. She hesitated. "Have you thought about staying in Portland longer?" "I already have," he said. "The real question is, do you want me here?" Her smile faltered, eyes turning away. "I don't know. I'm afraid that I'll disappear again." She nodded. "I won't promise," he said quietly, "but I'll stay long enough for Oliver to call me Dad and never confuse it." A beautiful stillness filled the space. They both looked at Oliver, their past and present meeting point, softening everything between them. Soon, their meetings extended beyond the cafe. Lachlan came by the apartment more often: afternoon walks through Washington Park, quiet dinners at home. Oliver grew used to his voice, steady arms, and gentle rhythm while rocked to sleep. One night, Hollis entered the living room and found Lachlan on the sofa, holding Oliver against his chest. The lamp cast a warm glow over him, tired, yet peaceful. He was humming softly, voice low and rough. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Hollis stood there, throat tight. She realized the man who had once broken her heart was making it calm again. Later that night, after Oliver was asleep, she poured 2 glasses of wine. They sat on the balcony, the cool air carrying the scent of rain. "You know," she said, "there's nothing special about Portland. I stayed because it doesn't remind me of the past. Maybe because it's giving you a chance to rewrite the present," he said. She looked at him. "And you think you're part of that present?" "I hope so." She smiled faintly. "I still don't know how much I can trust you." "Then let me prove it," he said softly, turning to her. Not with words, by staying. They fell silent. Streetlights cast a golden haze across their faces. Inside, Oliver's breathing was soft and steady. For the first time in years, Hollis didn't feel alone in her own life. When Lachlan stood to leave, she walked him to the door. "Coffee tomorrow?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "But I'll make it. Grounded's closed on Tuesdays. Your coffee's probably bitter. Not more than what you put me through," she teased. He smiled. "Then I'll bring the sugar." She laughed, and in that laugh, something melted. Not complete forgiveness, but enough to begin believing again. Through the window, she watched as he disappeared down the wet sidewalk, his shadow stretching long beneath the streetlights. The rain was still falling lightly, but for the first time, it didn't feel sad. Some loves don't return as storms. They come back quietly, in simple mornings filled with coffee, a child's laughter, and a gaze that never really faded. It was raining in Portland as if it had never rained before. The rain fell thick, weaving into fine threads that caught the yellow light from the street below. Wind beat against the windows of the Nines Hotel, where Lachlan Vance sat alone in his room, staring into a glass of untouched wine and the glimmering, water-soaked city beneath him. It was midnight. He had just gathered his papers to call it a night when a knock came, 3 quick, urgent taps. He frowned. No one knew this room number except Hollis. But it couldn't be her. He opened the door. It was her. Hollis Marin stood there, coat drenched, hair soaked, clutching a crying Oliver against her chest. She was breathless, voice breaking. "I'm sorry. He's burning up. I tried the hospital, but the power's out near our block. I didn't know who else to call." He didn't ask questions. "Come in," he said, his voice low and steady. He took a towel, helped dry her hair, then grabbed a thermometer. Oliver's sobs filled the quiet room. "Give him to me," Lachlan said softly. She hesitated, then placed the baby in his arms. The child was burning hot, trembling. Eyes were half closed. Lachlan pressed his palm to Oliver's forehead, then tucked him close against his chest. He wrapped the baby in a dry blanket and began to stroll around the room in a gentle figure 8. The rhythm smooth, steady, his hand patting the small back in time with a quiet hum. Hollis watched from the chair, unable to look away. She'd seen this man command hundreds, navigate billion-dollar crises without a flicker of emotion, yet now, holding a 9-month-old, he trembled like someone terrified of losing everything. "Where'd you learn that?" she asked softly. "Video tutorials," he said with a faint, raspy smile. "And my mother. She taught me to rock a baby in the shape of infinity." Hollis let out a wet laugh, tears still clinging to her lashes. "An infinity walk. Of course, you'd have a method for everything." He looked at her quietly. "There's no method for saying sorry." She said nothing. The rain beat softly against the glass. Oliver's cries faded to small breaths. Hollis came closer, touching Lachlan's shoulder. "Thank you." He shook his head. "I'm just doing what I should have done from the start." When Oliver finally slept, she lay him on the bed. They sat by the window, lamplight spilling over their faces. Hollis poured him a cup of ginger tea, her fingers trembling from the cold. "You know," she began, voice low, "the night I had Oliver, I looked around that hospital room. You weren't there. No one held my hand. No one said, 'You're doing great.' I thought, maybe you'd forgotten me." He lowered his head. "I didn't forget. I was just a coward, too scared to face what I broke." "You always have reasons," she said quietly. "Reasons for everything, even for walking away from someone who loved you." "No," he whispered. "There's no reason good enough anymore." She studied him, and he looked different in the lamp's soft glow. No longer the cold, unshakable man she'd once known, but someone softer, stripped bare, a little lost, a little human. "You asked why I never told you about Oliver," she said. "It's because I was afraid. Afraid you'd come back out of duty, not love." "I understand," he said. "But you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "I came back because I love you. Responsibility just gave me an excuse to find you again." Hollis laughed through her tears. "You still know how to say things that make it hard to stay angry." "I'm not saying them to win you over," he murmured. "I'm saying them because they're true. I missed you every day, every night. I thought I had everything, but without you, it was all just an echo. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Hollis rose and walked to the window, watching the slick streets glow under the lamps. You know, she said, Portland rain isn't like California's. It doesn't crash down. It lingers gentle, patient. Like it's reminding us that not everything has to end in noise. Lachlan joined her at the window. They stood side by side, breath close, silence, deep, no anger left, no logic, only two broken hearts relearning how to beat together. Dawn crept in, washing the city in silver. Oliver slept peacefully, lips parted in a soft dream. Hollis woke on the sofa and saw Lachlan sitting beside the bed, watching their son. The lamplight brushed his face, tired, tender, still. You didn't sleep? She asked. He smiled faintly. Didn't dare. I'm afraid I'll wake up and this will be gone. It's not a dream. I know. Because in dreams, he doesn't smile like that. She smiled, pulling the blanket higher over Oliver. I don't hate you, Lachlan. I'm just scared. Scared of what? Of believing again and losing again. He was silent for a long moment, then said softly, I won't promise anything, but if I had to choose between losing everything or losing you, I'd choose everything else this time. You said that when you proposed to me once, she whispered. Then you chose work. I know, but tonight, if you need to hear it again, I'll say it not because I want you to believe me, but because I need to believe it myself. She looked at him at the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion, the quiet sincerity. Finally, she exhaled. You don't have to say anything. Stay. He nodded. Those two words, stay, meant more to him than any forgiveness could. Morning. Hollis woke late. The room was quiet. She thought he'd left. But when she turned, he was still there sitting in the chair, Oliver asleep in his arms, head resting against his chest. Soft daylight filtered through the curtains, painting them in a gentle, faded gold. The sight froze her where she stood. For the first time in years, she saw something she'd never thought possible. Lachlan Vance at peace. He looked up, smiling. I think he likes my voice better than yours. She laughed. No, he's exhausted from hearing you talk so much. They both laughed, small and quiet but real. It sounded like the beginning of something. Then, his phone rang. The screen lit up with the name Eleanor Vance, Mom. He hesitated. Go ahead, Hollis said softly. He answered, Lachlan, where are you? In Portland. Mom, how long do you plan to stay? I don't know. The company needs you. You know that? I know. But my son needs me too. Silence. Then her voice softened. Your father once said the same thing, but he didn't mean it. Don't make his mistake. I won't. We'll see. The call ended. He set the phone down, exhaled. Trouble at the company? Hollis asked. Maybe. But right now, I don't want to think about it. You will have to, she said gently. Sooner or later. He nodded, knowing she was right. But he just wanted to hold on to this stillness a little longer. By noon, Hollis was ready to leave. She lifted Oliver into her arms and stopped at the door. Thank you for last night, she said. He smiled. I should be the one saying that. No, Lachlan. You did something I never thought you would. You stayed. He met her eyes. If you'll let me, I'd like to stay. A little longer. Maybe a lifetime. She didn't answer. She only leaned down and kissed his forehead quick, soft, like a quiet goodbye that didn't mean ending. Then she stepped into the hallway, rain whispering outside. Lachlan stood there, feeling the warmth of her touch linger. He didn't know what would happen next. All he knew was that the rain that night had changed him, not with thunder or lightning, but in silence. A man who had once lost everything finally realized what he could never afford to lose again. Rain had returned to Portland steady, unhurried, as if reminding everyone that summer was quietly fading. Hollis brewed tea inside the small Burnside Street apartment, while Oliver giggled on the playmat. Lachlan knelt nearby, holding up a toy star, his deep laugh mixing with the baby's bright, bubbling joy. Oliver had just learned to crawl, and every time Lachlan called, "Come here, buddy," the boy flipped over, creeping slowly toward him, smiling like a tiny beam of sunlight in the grey. I've never seen him get attached to someone this quickly, Hollis said softly. Maybe because he's like me, Lachlan replied, brushing his son's hair. We both needed someone to teach us how to love. The moment was so peaceful that neither noticed the phone vibrating on the table. Lachlan glanced at the screen. David Morrison, acting CEO of VanceTech. He hesitated, then turned it face down. "Work?" Hollis asked. "Nothing urgent. I'll call him later." She looked at him, eyes gentle but searching. "You can't ignore it forever, Lachlan. I know, but I'm afraid that if I hear their voices, I'll slip back into that world again." She stepped closer, resting a hand over his. "You don't have to run. You have to know what and who you choose." He squeezed her hand lightly. "Then I choose you. Both of you." But life rarely makes it easy for men learning how to be fathers. 3 days later, his phone rang again. Marcus Chen. "Lachlan, it's bad," Marcus said. "The board's voting to replace you." Morrison called for an emergency meeting in Singapore. Lachlan's stomach sank. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon." He stood by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass in straight lines. Half of him wanted to hang up. The other half knew that 15 years of his life would collapse overnight if he didn't go. "Thanks, Marcus," he said quietly. "You can't keep running from this," Marcus replied. "That company was your first child. You can't abandon it now." When the call ended, he turned to see Hollis standing in the kitchen doorway, her face calm, but her eyes saying everything. "You're going, aren't you?" He didn't answer. "How long?" "A few days." "I've heard that before," she whispered. "And you were gone 8 months." He stepped forward, taking her hand. "I'm not that man anymore. I'll come back." "Don't promise," she said softly, voice trembling. "Just do it." Though the weight in his chest told him it wouldn't be simple, he nodded. The next morning, he packed in silence. Hollis helped fold his shirts without a word. Oliver crawled over and tugged at his pant leg, babbling, "Bah." Just one small word, but it broke him. He knelt, scooping the boy into his arms. "Daddy has to go for a bit, okay? But I'll be back." Oliver didn't understand, he only giggled, wrapping tiny arms around his neck. Hollis stood nearby, tears gathering. "Do you know what I'm most afraid of, Lachlan? That I won't come back? No, that you will, but as the man I once had to walk away from." He pulled her close, whispering, "This time I'm not leaving for good. I will clean up what's left, so I can stay for real." She didn't answer, only leaned into him. And as the Portland rain fell outside, they stood in silence, two people who had once lost everything, daring to believe again. Singapore greeted him with heat, humidity, and fluorescent light. He walked into the VanceTech boardroom, 10 familiar faces staring back, polished and cold. David Morrison spoke first, calm but razor-sharp. "Investors are losing confidence. We need you to return or let someone else lead." Lachlan stayed silent. The charts, projections, and forecasts blurred together like noise. He had once been the man who commanded every number. Now he sat listening as the empire he'd built was discussed like a property on sale. "I need 48 hours, he said finally. Morrison nodded, smug. "Then we'll vote in 48 hours. That night, Lachlan sat alone in his hotel room. 2 photos lay on the table, one of Oliver, one of Hollis. Between them, his phone. He called. No answer. He tried again, and again. On the 3rd attempt, she picked up. Her face appeared on the screen, tired but calm, her hair loose around her shoulders. Behind her, the room was dim. Oliver slept in the crib. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Physically, yes," he said, forcing a smile. "They want me back. Do you want to go back?" "I don't know." "Then don't. I'm afraid if I walk away, I'll lose everything." "You already did, Lachlan," she said softly. "This time, just make sure you don't lose more." Her words hit like thunder in the tropical night. "I'll come home soon," he whispered. "Don't come back because you promised," she said. "Come back because you want to." Then she ended the call. The next morning, the board convened. Morrison presented his plan, a new CEO, younger, hungrier, colder. Heads nodded around the table. Lachlan listened quietly, then stood. "Do what you think is best," he said. "I'm not here to fight. I want this company to live, but I'm done dying for it." The room fell silent. He removed his watch, placed it on the table, and signed his resignation. "VanceTech will always be part of me," he said, "but it can't be all of me anymore." He walked out. Outside, the sky opened up, tropical rain pouring down. He tilted his head back, letting it wash over him, feeling free and hollow. That night, he boarded a commercial flight back to Portland, no private jet, no entourage, just one small suitcase and a heart too full of silence. When he arrived, Portland was still raining. He took a taxi to Burnside Street. But the apartment was dark, locked. He knocked, called her name. No answer. Through the glass, he saw a note taped to the inside of the door. Oliver and I went to my mother's for a few days. I need time, Hollis. He stood there, hand pressed to the cold glass. He didn't know whether to cry or smile, because at least she hadn't disappeared without a word. The next day, his mother called. You left VanceTech? Yes. Then you finally understand. You know your father died at his desk, don't you? He closed his eyes. He thought he was doing it for us, she continued. But really, he was just running from us. Don't repeat that, Lachlan. He breathed out slowly. I've already chosen, Mom. I hope it's not too late. Then start again, she said gently. With that child, with that woman, and with yourself. By late afternoon, Lachlan found himself at the park where he'd first seen Hollis again. He sat under a rain-soaked tree, watching other children play. Fear and faith tangled in his chest. He realized there were things his own father had never taught him, not because he refused to, but because he didn't know how. How to keep a family, how to love. How do I say I'm sorry without words? Those were lessons Lachlan would have to teach himself, and when he finally stood, the rain stopped. The sky over Portland lightened soft, golden, full of quiet promise. Some lessons fathers never teach, but sons eventually learn when they understand that the most significant loss is not failure, but losing the chance to love again. The sky over Portland was grey that day, heavy with clouds but no rain. Lachlan stood before the small house on Maple Street, the one he knew Hollis had moved into. He stood there for a long time, coat speckled with road dust, shoes damp, a simple bouquet of wild daisies trembling in his hand. No driver, no bodyguard, just him and a heart that beat unevenly. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there before the door opened. Hollis appeared, grey sweater, hair tied up, face tired yet still achingly beautiful, just as she'd been that first day in Austin. In her arms was Oliver, now old enough to run, laugh, and speak his first words. The little boy squealed, "Daddy!" Hollis froze. Lachlan didn't speak, he only smiled. His eyes showed gratitude, fear, and a quiet apology that needed no words. "What are you doing here, Lachlan?" she asked, calm but unsure. "I came to see my son." "You're seeing him now." "Not just to see him, Hollis. I want to stay. I want to be his father, really." She didn't answer. Only Oliver's laughter broke the silence as his tiny hands reached for him. Lachlan knelt and opened his arms. The boy ran forward, stumbling, crashing into him like there had never been a single day apart. He held his son close, kissed the top of his hair, and whispered, voice breaking, "Hey buddy, Daddy's here. I'm home." Inside, the house was small, warm, and full of quiet live photos of Oliver on the wall, a few plants on the windowsill, and the air scented with tea and rain. "When did you move here?" he asked. "A month ago," she said, pouring him tea. "My mom helps with Oliver. It's calmer here." He nodded, looking around. "It's beautiful, just like you." "Don't start that, Lachlan," she said gently. "I'm tired." "I'm not here to start over," he said. "I'm here to begin for real this time." She looked at him. "And what's the difference?" "The difference is this time I don't have a plan, a boardroom, or an empire to prove something. Just two empty hands. And this little boy." He smiled at Oliver. "And whatever faith I'm still learning to rebuild." She was silent. Then he pulled out a thin folder and placed it on the table. "What's that?" she asked. "Papers. The transfer of my remaining shares in VanceTech. Part goes to a housing charity fund, the rest to Oliver." "You gave it all away?" "Not given," he said with a small smile. "Returned what I'd borrowed from the world." She stared at him for a long moment. "You really don't plan to go back?" "No. I built an empire out of fear of being forgotten. Now I want to build a home out of love that's remembered." Her eyes softened. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he murmured. "Just let me show you." Evening light streamed through the window, soft gold falling over Oliver, asleep between them. "Do you think you'll be a better father this time?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," he said. "But I know how to be here. I'll learn." She smiled faintly. "You're still stubborn." "Yeah. But this time I'm using it not to walk away." Outside, the rain began again, gentle, warm, like a breath against the earth. A week later came the first morning of Lachlan's new life. He woke early, trying to mix formula in the kitchen. Milk powder spilled everywhere, water splashed across the counter, and the bottle lid was screwed on backwards. Hollis appeared in the doorway, laughing softly. "You actually look human now." "Human," he said, pretending to be offended. "Yeah, not a billionaire, not some headline. Just a man learning how to be a dad." He chuckled. "Being human is messy but kind of adorable." He grinned. "I'm recording that, so I can replay it at 3 a.m. when he starts crying again." She laughed louder. Her laughter filled the kitchen, blending with the soft patter of rain outside. Oliver joined in, clapping his tiny hands. The three laughed, small, imperfect, but warm enough to dissolve every scar the years had left behind. That afternoon, they took Oliver to the park. Hollis sat on a bench watching as father and son played their clumsy game of chase. Lachlan ran slow enough for Oliver to catch him. Each time the boy touched the ball, he squealed, and Lachlan would fall to the grass, feigning defeat. Tears welled in Hollis's eyes. For the first time, she saw a picture she hadn't dared imagine. Not a perfect family, but a real one. No wealth, no pretense, just dirt on their hands and love in their hearts. When the sun began to set, they sat together on the bench, Oliver asleep in her arms. "You know," Lachlan said softly, "I used to think success meant being strong, untouchable. The bravest thing I've ever done was let myself be weak." She looked at him. Weak, but still here. Exactly. He reached for her hand, gently, careful not to wake the baby. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Just for a chance to do this again, not as your husband, but as someone walking beside you." "I'm not promising anything," she replied. "I know. I'll stay anyway." She met his eyes, and this time, what he saw wasn't doubt, but a trembling hope mixed with fear of loving again. "Have you really changed?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "I've just stripped away the parts that made you stop recognizing me." Outside, the breeze carried the scent of wisteria. Spring had come to Portland, damp, tender, forgiving. Oliver stirred, opened his eyes, and murmured, "Bah." They both smiled. Hollis whispered, "Maybe. Maybe I'll give you a chance. Not to go back, but to move forward. That's all I've ever wanted." He held her hand, not tightly, not pleadingly, just enough to feel the warmth of the woman he'd once lost and somehow found again. Sometimes coming home isn't about turning back time. It's about finding who you truly are, right where you lost yourself. Morning. The scent of coffee drifted through the small kitchen. Soft light filtered through white curtains, falling across a wooden table scratched by years of use. Hollis, in a loose shirt and tied-up hair, arranged flowers in a glass jar. Oliver ran circles around the couch, clutching a little blue toy car, laughter spilling behind him. At the sink, Lachlan stood with his sleeves rolled, washing dishes, an image no one would believe of the man who once ruled VanceTech. "You missed a spoon," Hollis teased. He turned, smiling. "I'm not a full-time employee here, you know. In this house," she said, "whoever does the dishes makes the rules. Then I'll wash them all." She laughed softly. "You still don't know when to stop." Oliver tugged at his pant leg. "Daddy." Lachlan bent, scooping the boy up, settling him on his shoulders. Oliver squealed with joy, arms out like wings. For a moment, the small house filled with laughter, the kind of sound Lachlan had once forgotten he could want so much. The day unfolded through simple things. He took Hollis and Oliver to the park. They went grocery, shopping, bread, milk, lettuce. That night, they cooked dinner together. Hollis always added red wine to her spaghetti sauce. For the first time, Lachlan realized food didn't need to come from a Michelin chef to feel perfect. "You're terrible at cutting carrots," she said, watching him fumble with the knife. "I used to cut contracts, not vegetables. If Oliver hears that, he'll think his dad's a detective." "Maybe I was," he smiled. "Spent 10 years chasing profit, not happiness." She looked at him quietly. "And now? Now, I think I've found it. If not here, then nowhere." She didn't reply, but in her silence, something softened. Night came. Oliver fell asleep early. Hollis sat on the couch reading while Lachlan sat beside her, laptop open but dark. Outside, rain whispered against the roof. "Don't you miss work?" she asked, eyes still on her book. "I do," he said, "but I miss this more." "This?" "The feeling of being at peace inside my own life." She looked up and met his gaze, calm, warm, grounded. It was the peace she'd once begged him to find. "You've really changed," she murmured. "I didn't change," he said softly. "I just came home to myself." Late that night, Oliver woke crying. Hollis stirred, but Lachlan was already there, lifting the boy, humming quietly, rocking him while whispering the old song, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Hollis stood by the doorway, tears welling for reasons she couldn't name. When he laid Oliver back down, he turned and saw her watching. "I used to think some things never come back," she said. "So did I," he whispered. "But maybe if the people are still here, nothing's ever really gone." They stood close, their breaths mixing with the sound of rain. No kisses, no promises, just presence, and sometimes that's enough. A month passed. The little house built its own rhythm. Hollis cooked, Lachlan cleaned, and handled mornings with Oliver. Evenings were for story time. Oliver began to take his first steps, wobbling from one pair of waiting arms to the other, and every stumble made them laugh. The walls bore faint marks from little hands and toys. The air smelled of food and baby lotion. It wasn't perfect, it was alive. One quiet weekend afternoon, Hollis sat on the porch with tea, watching Lachlan teach Oliver to kick a ball. He ran slowly so the boy could keep up, pretending to fall every time Oliver touched the ball. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes love doesn't come back through apologies. It just shows up every day, right where it once left. Hollis smiled. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. When they returned, Oliver clung to his father's neck, face flushed from laughter. "You never used to smile like this," she said. "I never had a reason to." She looked at him for a moment. "Lachlan, if someday you want to return to work, I won't stop you." He shook his head. "I don't need work to feel worth something. I need to see you two every morning. But you belong to the world out there." "No," he said gently. "I used to. Now I belong here." The words stayed with her long after. After Oliver fell asleep that night, they shared half a bottle of red wine on the couch. "Do you ever think this could end?" she asked quietly. "I used to," he said, "but I'm not afraid anymore. If it ends, at least I know I lived it fully." "I'm still afraid," she admitted. "Because you have more to lose," he said softly. "I get it." She looked at him. "And if I can't say love yet, then I'll wait. No pressure, no deadlines. Just here. Every day." Her eyes glimmered in the low light. "You know, there are things I stopped wishing for long ago. But watching you two, I feel something lift inside me." He smiled and took her hand. "Maybe that's how love returns, not in fireworks, but in warmth." Outside, Portland was still and quiet. The soft rhythm of Oliver's breathing filled the space between them inside the little house. Hollis drifted to sleep, her head resting on his shoulder. Lachlan stayed awake, watching the gentle rain slide down the window, whispering to the night, "If this is all I ever have, it's already enough." June rarely brought strong winds to Portland, but that morning the wind howled through the maple trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and mist. The sky was dim, and Oliver, the little boy whose laughter once filled the whole block, lay still on the couch, cheeks flushed with fever. Hollis touched his forehead, her voice trembling. "He's burning up." Lachlan grabbed the thermometer. 39.5, he muttered, his brow tightening. He lifted Oliver into his arms. The child whimpered, eyelids heavy. "Hospital," Lachlan said firmly. Rain began to hammer the windshield as they sped off. Hollis held Oliver close while Lachlan drove through the storm, every breath of the boy's ragged breathing tearing at his chest. He remembered the first time he'd held him that rainy night at the Nines, when the baby had fit entirely in his arms. He'd sworn he'd never let anything or anyone hurt him. Now, watching Oliver's small body tremble, it felt like punishment for every wrong he'd ever done. The emergency room was cold and bright. The doctor babbled, "Viral fever. He's dehydrated, we'll start fluids and keep him overnight." Hollis nodded, gripping her son's hand. Lachlan stood beside her, silent. He wasn't a CEO now. Not the man who once commanded thousands. He was just a father terrified. He watched the IV line drip, each drop sinking with the fragile heartbeat of his world. Hollis placed a hand on his shoulder. "He'll be okay." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm scared, Hollis. Scared of losing again." "I know," she whispered, "but you're not losing this time." They stayed all night beside the hospital bed. Outside, the rain never stopped. The sound of it merged with the steady beeping of the IV monitor, like a heartbeat echoing through the room. Near midnight, Lachlan's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Chen. David Morrison's under investigation. The board wants you back as interim CEO. If you refuse, the company could collapse. He stared at the screen, its weight sinking deep. VanceTech, his first creation, the monument to his pride. But here, in this small hospital room, his real child lay fighting off a fever. He turned off the phone and slipped it into his pocket. Not tonight. By morning, Oliver's fever broke. When the boy opened his eyes and saw him, he smiled weakly. "Daddy," just one word, and Lachlan broke. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to Oliver's hand. "I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." Hollis watched them, and for the first time, she believed him. Maybe, this time, he wasn't just saying it. A week later, when Oliver was fully recovered, Lachlan sat on the porch, watching the soft drizzle. Hollis joined him, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "They messaged again, didn't they?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. Will you go?" Silence. The wind rustled through the trees. "I used to think if I left VanceTech, I wouldn't be myself," he said. "But now, I'm afraid that if I go back, I'll lose myself for real." "Maybe you don't have to choose," she said softly. "You could go back, but differently." "Differently?" "Not to win, to help. You always said you wanted to do something that mattered, remember?" He looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. "You mean, go back, but not to prove anything?" She smiled. "Go back as the man Oliver can be proud of." He nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That afternoon, Marcus stopped by. "You've been gone too long, Lachlan," he said. "The company's a mess, but everyone still remembers who can save it." "Maybe," Lachlan replied. "But I'll only save it if it doesn't cost me this family." Marcus smiled faintly. "Guess you finally figured out what matters most." Before leaving, he glanced around the cozy little house. "So, this is your new office?" Lachlan chuckled. "Yeah. Headquarters of happiness." Hollis read a bedtime story that night while Lachlan sat nearby, listening to her calm, steady voice. When she closed the book, Oliver was already asleep. "Do you realize something strange?" she said quietly. "What?" "Before, every decision you made hurt someone. Now, whichever you choose, it's out of love." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what they call late maturity. Better late than never." She started to rise, but he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said softly, "for still being here." "I don't know how long I'll stay," she murmured. "But tonight, I am. That's enough." He couldn't sleep that night. He stepped out to the balcony, watching the quiet Portland skyline. His phone buzzed again, a message from his mother. "Your father lost his second chance at love. Don't you do the same?" Lachlan smiled and typed back, "I'm learning, one day at a time." The wind had changed. No longer cold, no longer carrying the metallic scent of the boardroom, only the damp sweetness of Portland after rain. Tomorrow, he might return to the world he once ruled, but this time, he would bring this new world with him, not to prove his success, but to show that he'd finally changed. Some winds only rise to test if we truly mean to stay, and when we stand firm, we understand. Happiness isn't the absence of storms, but knowing who's waiting beside you when the rain begins to fall. 4 months later, Portland had slipped quietly into autumn. Maple leaves painted the sidewalks in shades of red and gold, and the small house on Maple Street had grown fuller, a tiny desk tucked in the corner, sketches scattered across it, and the sound of Oliver's laughter each morning. Lachlan sat on the floor surrounded by drafts, not of tech systems, but blueprints for a clean energy housing project. He and Hollis had co-founded a small non-profit, the Marin and Vance Foundation, building affordable homes from recycled materials for Portland families in need. "You know," Hollis said, sipping her coffee, "if someone had told me 8 years ago I'd work with you again, I would have laughed." "So would I," he replied. "Back then, I thought happiness could be measured in growth charts. And now? Now I know the only chart worth watching is my son's smile curve." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're starting to sound like a poet." "No," he smiled. "Just a man who nearly lost everything." Portland's rain began to fall outside, soft, steady, familiar. But this time, it no longer felt cold. It sounded like music, the rhythm of wounds finally healed. That afternoon, Hollis stepped onto the porch and saw Lachlan teaching Oliver to draw. On the paper, the little boy had made 3 circles, one big, one medium, one small, surrounded by a ring of blue. "What's that?" she asked. "Daddy, Mommy, me," Oliver said proudly. "All in one circle." She swallowed hard. Lachlan smiled. "Our little guy just taught me the greatest lesson." "What lesson?" "No one has to be perfect to be loved, just willing to stay inside the same circle." Hollis turned away, afraid he'd see her tears, but they weren't bitter anymore. They were warm, the kind that come when you finally find your way home. One October evening, Lachlan's phone rang. It was Marcus. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked. "The board wants you back as CEO, full authority. They trust you." "You know what they really trust, Marcus?" "What?" "That I'm still the same man I used to be. But I'm not. So what will you do?" "I'll build something new, smaller, but true." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then chuckled. "I suppose this time you won't need a security team." Lachlan laughed. "I've got the best protection in the world now, one named Oliver, and one named Hollis." When Hollis walked in, he set the phone down. "VanceTech again?" she asked. "Yeah, they want me back." "And you?" "I'm staying." She didn't say anything, just stepped closer and touched his hand. That single gesture said everything. By November, they had moved to the San Francisco Bay, opening their foundation's first office there. Their new home was small but faced the water. Sunlight broke through the fog each morning, glimmering silver across the waves. Oliver ran in circles through the yard, holding a red kite. Lachlan watched him, then turned to Hollis. "I used to think the most beautiful light came from a screen," he said softly. "Now I know nothing compares to this." "To what?" she asked. "The light on his face when he smiles." She smiled. "You've really changed, Lachlan Vance." "No," he said. "I've just become myself again." That afternoon, they walked along the beach. The wind carried salt and warmth. Oliver ran ahead, his red kite soaring high against the blue sky. Hollis walked beside Lachlan, their hands brushing. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if we'd never broken up?" "I do," he said. "But if we hadn't, I might never have learned how to love you correctly." She stopped and looked at him. "I forgive you." The wind swept through her hair, tasting faintly of the sea. "I never dared ask for that," he whispered. "But, thank you." "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "Forgiving you freed me, too." The sun dipped low, spilling red light across San Francisco Bay as waves lapped gently against the sand. Oliver ran back, taking both their hands. "Look, Mommy, Daddy, the kite's so high." They looked up. The red kite shimmered in the sunset, small, fragile, but flying strong. Lachlan murmured, "Just like us. Torn once, but still soaring. We just needed the right wind." Hollis tilted her head, resting on his shoulder. "Are you my wind, then?" He smiled. "No, Oliver is. I'm just the string keeping you from flying too far away." They both laughed, the deep, effortless laughter of people finally coming home. When dusk settled, they sat on the sand, Hollis leaning against him. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think our story had ended." "And I," he said, "always knew it had only paused so we could learn how to write it again." The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and quiet joy. Far across the bay, the city lights began to glow 1,000 artificial stars. Oliver slept in her arms, his tiny hand wrapped around Lachlan's finger. "If there's another life," Lachlan said softly, "I'd still want to start again from that rainy night on the 40th floor. Only this time, I wouldn't let you walk away first." Hollis closed her eyes. "And this time, I won't." Across San Francisco Bay, the water shimmered with light, flickering with the small, living things that had survived the storm. Love, faith, peace. Because sometimes, the real miracle isn't finding each other again. It's recognizing each other after all the seasons have changed. Perhaps true happiness isn't finding someone perfect, but finding someone who still chooses to stay, even after seeing every imperfection. Thank you for walking with Hollis, Lachlan, and little Oliver. From the cold rains of Portland to the warm light over San Francisco Bay. If their story touched your heart, comment to share your thoughts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so I can keep telling you more stories about love, not just written, but felt with every heartbeat.